what is Christ going to be like when he comes back? What is the end result going to look like? We've got glimpses and pictures. Yeah, it describes some of it, right? But then it goes for eternity. Yeah, like we see the end times, and we see God restoring all things, but for eternity, what's that going to look like? I don't know. It'll be good, though.
Here on the new earth or whatever, for 1,000 years or the new millennia.
What?
With Jesus, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know what happens after that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, after that, right, God judges the world. Jesus judges.
Again, right?
No. So the order is the millennial kingdom, the judgment, and then God restores all things. Revelations 19, 20, 21, 22. But yeah, after that, it's going to be amazing. Yes?
I have some kind of dumb questions about that. One, so if God restores the earth, well, this is really weird, but will there be hamburgers and food? Because you can't kill them. And I don't know why that's a big deal. And two, are we going to be is there any suggestions that we be taking care of the earth again, like the original plan? And if so, do we have to just or is that
Yeah, so for the second one, it looks like, as we read through eschatology stuff, that God is going to give us things to do, like in taking care of the earth. The second one, I'll let Jacob answer that question if he ever teaches eschatology, because my wife and I currently have a debate of whether or not there's going to be food in heaven, and she hates my answer. I say, no, there won't be food in heaven, but there's not a scriptural basis for that. That's just a fun argument. Cool. Any other questions before we move on? Nope. Okay. Biblical covenants, Adamic covenant, conform and fulfill the image of God. Noahic covenant reaffirms the Adamic and promises protection. Right? So we're going to see this first arrow. God creates, humanity rebels. What happens in Genesis 4? Do you guys remember? The first story after Adam and Eve fall? Get kicked out of the garden? So he curses them in Genesis 3. What happens with their kids? Adam and Eve's kids. Cain kills Abel, right? Ultimate sin, right? I say ultimate. There's not sin that's greater than the others, but it's a horrific scene, right? The Garden of Eden is perfect. Humanity rebels. We introduce sin into creation, and then we see one of the people made according to God's image killed. Right? We should grieve that. And then we see global corruption in Genesis 6. I want us to turn there because I want us to read a couple of extra verses. But Genesis 6:5. All right, so keep in mind the idea of creation. God looked at it and saw it was very good. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. Man. The thing that God looked at and said, it is very good. The pinnacle of creation. Every thought they had was continually evil. 6. Look at God's response. The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. Holy cow. That should weigh our hearts like nothing else. If we don't appreciate the weight of our sin, we should look at God's response here. The Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals to creeping things and to birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I ever made them. Wow, before we get to verse 8, it's bleak, right? Thank God there's verse 8. Verse 8 says, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." Oh, thank you, someone, right? Oh, God just said he was going to wipe out the entire earth, all of creation. But Noah found favor. Good, there's a but. Let's see. Yeah, Genesis 6:11 through 12. Now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way upon the earth. And then God speaks to Noah. Verse 13. Then God said to Noah, "The end of all flesh has come before me. The earth is filled with violence because of them, and behold, I am about to destroy them with the earth. Make for yourself an ark." Right? And then he gives all the measurements. And then we see in verse 18, "But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark, you and your sons and your wives and your sons' wives with you. And every living thing of all flesh, you shall bring them two of every kind into the ark, and keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female." Right? So the chapter ends with Noah doing according to what God instructs him to do. Right? So God makes a way, this first covenant here. He's slowly reintroducing his plan for restoration. So the flood happens. We're going to read 9:5. Actually, let's just start with verse 1. "And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, 'Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth.'" What does that sound like? Yeah, we're supposed to recognize this language. "The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, and the fish of the sea into your hand they are given." What does that sound like? The Adamic covenant. A little bit, right? There's that idea of dominion into your hand they're given. But what's the new thing there? It's fear. Yeah, no, you're good. Verse 2, "The fear of you and the terror of you will be on the animals and on the fish and on the birds," right? So that's a little bit different. Verse 4, "You shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Surely I will require your life blood. From every beast I will require it. From every man, from every brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. For as for you, be fruitful and multiply. Populate the earth abundantly and multiply it." So remember that question I asked earlier about, did sin make us not made in God's image? According to his image? What do you guys see here? Are we or aren't we? Yeah. Seems like we still are. Verse 6. "Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man." Right? So there is still something sacred to human life. Right? We are still somehow made according to his image. Right? I think that's an important piece of this. So we see God is reestablishing, reinstating, and confirming the Adamic covenant, and he promises to never flood the earth again. So let's keep reading. "Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, 'Now behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you. and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. I establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the water of the flood, neither shall there be a flood to destroy the earth. God said, this is the sign of the covenant, which I am making between me and you, and every living creature that is set with you, for all successive nations. I set my bow in the cloud. It shall be for a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow will be seen in the cloud. And I will remember my covenant, which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh. Never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all the flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant, which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. So what's the sign of the covenant? The bow. Yeah. The rainbow. I will establish my bow, right? So this idea of God is reminding himself, when it rains, when the clouds cover the earth, it's not going to rain that much, right? It might flood, but not over the whole earth. He has established something to remind us of this covenant. So he reinstates the Adamic covenant, promises to never again fill the earth. God establishes another law. What law is that in 6? Don't shed man's blood. By man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. Right? So don't kill. Don't shed the lifeblood of another person who bears God's image. Right? Never destroy the ground or any living thing on the basis of man's wickedness. Right? So there will be judgment, but it's not going to look like this again. Questions? No? Okay. What's that? Okay. All right. If you guys ever see Imago Dei, that's image of God. Okay. Adamic covenant emphasizes humanity's responsibility to rule as God's image bearers on the earth. Noahic covenant reaffirms the Adamic and promises protection. The Abrahamic covenant establishes land, blessing, nation extend through his offspring, reaffirmed to Isaac and Jacob. Okay? What's that? I can't believe I forgot that up there. It's one of my favorite ones, too. I'll write it to the side. Thank you. All right. So, Genesis 11. After the Noahic covenant, we go through some genealogy, right? Genesis 10. There's the descendants of Noah. And then Genesis 11 happens, right? What do we see in the Tower of Babel story? Yeah, so we point here and say this is how we got multiple languages. But we see humanity gathering. What were they commanded to do? Spread out. You're supposed to go and fill the whole earth. But they gather together and they say, let us build a tower to the heavens. And we will be like God. Right? They're trying to put themselves in God's position. And God comes and confuses the languages so that they don't accomplish that. Right? What is the sad part about this? God just gave them another chance. Right? The Noahic covenant. He wiped out all of the earth because of the wickedness. He reestablished his covenant creation, or creation covenant with them and said, go and do what I said. Go and do what you were created to do. And here they are not doing what they're supposed to do, right? And it kind of creates a sense of, here we go again, right? And then we get to Genesis 12. 12, 1 through 3. Okay, so all that story, there's another little genealogy in 11, and then there's some beautiful words. Now, the Lord said to Abram. Those are special words. The Lord said to Abram. Who is initiating this interaction? God. Yeah, the Lord said to Abram. There's nothing in here that makes it seem like Abraham was righteous. Abraham did really cool things in the sight of God. He was seeking God. No. The Lord said to Abram. Right? He went and said, I'm going to talk to you. For whatever reason. Right? Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. And I will make you a great nation. And I will bless you. And I will make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you. And the one who curses you, I will curse. And in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Those are really cool words coming from God. Speaking into the wickedness of humanity. Calling this man, go to the land I will give you. Right? So, in these words, what are some personal aspects that you see that are between God and Abram? Yeah, absolutely. Are there any others? So I will make your name great, make you into a great nation. I will bless you. Yeah, it's kind of the starting of the idea, right? Of those nations who curse you, I will curse them. Yeah, absolutely. So we see protection through that, right? I will bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. There's the mediator, so you shall be a blessing, and I will bless those who bless you, right? So that idea of you are going to be a blessing, and because of that, I will bless other people because of you. How about national aspects? There's 3 aspects to this language here. So we see that he will be made into a great nation. He will be given land, posterity, right? So some clout. I will make you into a great nation. And then there's the universal aspects. We'll turn to 17 here in just a second. But the very last thing in here, and in you, all the families of the earth will be blessed. All the families of the earth will be blessed. So that's actually one thing that when Jesus comes on the scene, all the way in the future, right, the Jewish people are still waiting for this. They know the Abrahamic covenant. And they say, how is God going to bless all the nations of the earth, all the families of the earth, through his seed, through his descendants? It hasn't happened yet, right? They thought it was going to be a great kingdom, or, right? They had some ideas of what it could be. But we know that that's fulfilled in Christ. So let's flip forward a little bit to 17. Okay. Let's see, 17, 4 through 6. We'll start in 3. Abraham fell on his face, because God was talking to him. Lord appeared to Abram. Abram fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, as for me, behold, my covenant is with you. And you will be a father of the nation, multitude of nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham. For I have made you a father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you, and kings will come from you. I will establish my covenant between me and your descendants after you, throughout the generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants after you. I will give to you and to your descendants after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So what do you guys see in that one? There is quite a bit, yeah. I'll just point out, between me and your descendants, verse 7, after you throughout the generations for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and to your descendants after you. I will give to you and to your descendants after you the land of your sojournings, all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God. So there's an element to this. So he's promising them land. He's promising him nations will come from him. Kings will be born from you. And this was before he had Isaac, right? So these were big words for him, especially in the ancient Near East. A son meant your family was going to go on, and he didn't have that yet. But there's an everlasting element to this, right? There's an eternal element to this. He says, I will establish, verse 7, an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants after you, right? So that covenant is not just going to die with Abraham, right? It's not just going to die with Isaac. It's not just going to be done with Jacob. So on and so forth, right? It's amazing. As you read through Genesis, if you have this picture in your mind, you'll see that God reinforces the covenant with Isaac. He reinforces the covenant with Jacob. And it's something that the nation of Israel will hold to even today, right? This is something that if we want to understand the scene that Jesus was born into, this is important. Okay, any questions? No. Okay, we've got a few minutes to do the Mosaic. Mosaic covenant, land-centered, blessing and curses-centered. Okay? So the crisis, let's see. Let's actually turn to Galatians 3:17 through 19 real quick. All right, it says, what I'm saying is this. The law, which came 430 years, let's start in 16. Now the promises were spoken to Abraham, and to his seed. He does not say, and to seeds, as referring to many things, but rather to one. And to your seed, that is Christ. What I am saying is this. The law, which came 430 years later, does not invalidate a covenant previously ratified by God, so as to nullify the promise. For if the inheritance is based on law, it is no longer based on a promise. But God has granted it to Abraham by means of a promise. Why the law then? It was added because of transgressions, having been ordained through angels by the agency of a mediator, until the seed would come, to whom the promise had been made. So who is the seed that was promised to Abraham? That was the immediate, right? But the eternal aspect, Jesus. Yeah. Verse 16 in here says that it's not seeds, but seed. That is Christ, right? And just because they went through 400 years of slavery, and just because God made another covenant, that does not mean that the promises made to Abraham were null and void, right? So God is going to make another covenant after the captivity. So after the captivity, for over 400 years, Israel had forgotten the promises made before them and how God relates to them, right? If you read through Abraham's story, you'll see that God even tells him his descendants will be in captivity for 400 years. But then he would lead them out, and he would be their God. Okay, so Exodus 2, we're out of Genesis, guys. We're making progress. So Genesis 2, they're being oppressed. 2:24. They're being oppressed. Verse 23. Now it came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died. The sons of Israel sighed because of their bondage, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their bondage rose up to God. So God heard their groaning. God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the sons of Israel, and God took notice of them. And that begins the story of Moses and the Exodus. Exodus 19. Who remembers what's in Exodus 19? I'm really testing your guys' memory skills here.
The Lord reveals himself at Mount Sinai, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
You nail on the head. I love it. Yeah. So God takes the Israelites to Mount Sinai, and he begins speaking to them, right? Exodus 20 is the famous one, the Ten Commandments, right? So verse 3, Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, and tell the sons of Israel, You yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So then they go through this whole process of consecrating themselves, preparing to hear from God. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. That's verse 17. And then the Lord, verse 20, came down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. The Lord called Moses to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. Okay, so then there's this process of God unpacking the law. He gives Moses the law, the Ten Commandments. He goes through ordinances for the people, what to do if people injure other people. 21:15, he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death, right? So all the fun commandments that we love, the law stuff. 22:1, if a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. So all the fun, invigorating stuff, right? But the picture is Moses is at the top of the Mount Sinai, speaking and receiving this from God, right? Then 24 comes. 24:3-8. Then Moses came and recounted to all the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances. And the people answered with one voice and said, All the words which the Lord had spoken we will do. Moses wrote down all the words of the Lord. Then he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He sent young men of the sons of Israel, and they offered burnt offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings to the Lord. Moses took half the blood and put it in basins, and the other half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. Then he took the book of the covenant and read it, in the hearing of the people, and they said, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do, and we will be obedient." So Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people, and said, "Behold the blood of the covenant, which the Lord has made with you in accordance with these words." So what was Israel's promise to God? Yeah, probably more than the Ten Commandments, right? Because they unpacked all these laws. But they said, "We will obey. We will be your people." And they didn't just like, "I pinky promise," right? They went through a whole long time where the young men of Israel were taking animals to this altar and slaughtering them. And Moses gets a bowl full of blood and sprinkles all these people. I know, it's super gross, right? Not sanitary. But this idea was that this was not just a, yeah, that's cool, we're going to do it. It was a ceremony. It took time. It cost them the lives of animals. This lifeblood was spilled. And they said, "We will be your people. We will be your people." Now we know, because of our class in Deuteronomy, that God knew they weren't going to succeed. They weren't going to be obedient. But he was making a way. Right? He was making a way for us to be restored as image bearers. He was preparing the way for Christ. Nope. Go backwards. There we go. Okay, so he was preparing the way for Christ. Any questions about the Mosaic covenant? No? Oh, yeah. So I would say they probably forgot quicker than the other. Moses at least lasted 3 generations, right? The people of Israel, they leave Mount Sinai and they get to the Jordan River and they send over the scouts and they say, "Man, there's giants over here. We can't do it." And they grumble and they complain. And so maybe a couple of weeks after this, we should go back to Egypt. Moses brought us out here to die. Like, we're never going to be able to conquer these people. They forgot so quick who God was and that he was their God, right? And then they wander the desert for 40 years. They come back. There's Deuteronomy. God kind of reaffirms, restates the law, it encourages them. Moses dies. Joshua takes over. Hooray, we're going. Joshua happens, right? Then Joshua dies. And it's like 1 generation. Or it seems like 1 generation. It's fairly quick that all of a sudden Israel is oppressed. And what does that mean when Israel is oppressed? Yeah, according to the blessings and curses, right? It says that they did what was right in their own eyes. They did according to their own hearts. And we see this idea of they sinned. And they needed redemption fairly quick. It didn't last super long, right? At least the Abrahamic covenant, they were like Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, right? There's this lineage that set them up in Egypt. And then they forgot over 400 years, but that's a long time, right? So God brings them out and reminds them. And then it begins a cycle.